Twas the Devil is a strange project.
Twas the Devil is a 17th century
choose your own adventure,
road movie,
folklore,
thriller,
folk tale,
occult,
folk horror
thing,
as churned up by Mark Garvey.
So it's set in a particular place and time where a lot of controversial, horrendous stuff was happening, and we wanted that to be the backdrop of our character's journey.
I play Zachary in that, and it's a story about me accusing my wife of witchcraft, and she is dunked for this and drowned, therefore she was innocent.
His mission of which is to carry his dead wife, Agnes,
Returning her to a resting place up at Thaxted, her final wish there.
That's a difficult journey for him, not just because of the various trials and tribulations and characters and challenges along the way, but he's also burdened with the guilt that he is responsible for his wife's death.
obviously carrying a lot of guilt on his shoulders, as well as a massive coffin.
I meet people along the way, and they tell me things, I tell them others, and you know, it's just this battle.
Because it's somebody on a path, trying to get somewhere and encountering various people and other obstacles along this path.
I just see it, the character, as carrying out quite a stoic task.
God help him, he's trying to make his way to make his restitution.
It was going to be a feature film, and it was going to be a zero budget, indie, 80-minute, quite easily achievable compared to the previous project.
he wanted to do something simpler.
Simple, straightforward, ABC linear narrative.
And I remember him very specifically telling me, so it's a sort of 17th century road movie, you know, not a massive cast.
There was the idea to make the narrative interactive, make this a choose your own adventure.
I think he waited until the very last moment to tell me it was a choose your own adventure, and that the project was indeed going to be as gargantuan, as difficult, maybe even more so in some ways, in some levels, as Union Jack was.
It felt like the right thing to do because the film's themes are very much about right and wrong and making choices and the consequences of those choices.
Well, I guess it's those ideas of choice come through in that, and it echoes, well, Zachary's beliefs that, you know, life is choice, life is making decisions.
We decided to put the viewer of the film in the position of the protagonist Zachary and have to make these choices.
So you've got lots of choices to make throughout the journey.
The viewer has to make a decision whether you act in a particular way or whether you geographically go in a particular direction.
There's sort of theologies that there is no God's will or something, it's simply you carrying out the next action, going left or going right, doing the next indicated thing, and that is God's will, the addition of all the different choices you have to make.
And that's done in a way to not be in any way preachy. We're not sort of the moral police. We're not the ethics cops or anything like that.
You just have to carry on. There's no progress without those contradictions.
The actions and the choices do have consequences and do determine what happens to your character and your experience. It leads to an eventual outcome, whether that's good or bad or right or wrong or positive or negative. It's for the viewer to decide. There's no judgment there. There's just different experiences.
Choose your own adventure aspect is a really interesting one because it's a very modern cinematic technique. The difference is we're taking it right back to the 17th century.
By making it interactive and having these different strands and different scenes, it became much more challenging in terms of production and pre-production and post-production. The whole thing became this huge jigsaw with a lot of moving parts. But in terms of visualising it, it makes it very hard. So when you talk about a simple linear beginning, middle and end feature film, it's very easy to in your mind or in pre-production, get a sense of how that will go and what that will be like. But with this, where you could be on 16 different alternative scenes at any one given time, it's very difficult to visualise or comprehend how that will work, let alone the scenes prior to that or after that. So it's a real minefield. In the past we've done script readings, for example, and we've just sat around and turned the pages as they are, numbered, numerically in a linear fashion from the first page to the last page and read the script. When we were doing a script reading for this project, we were sat there going, oh, right, end of this one, you choose this, turn to page 88, right, and going back and forth and all over the place. So little things like that, which sound trivial, were actually interesting and new. So I think we all learnt a lot doing this project. So the audience make decisions along the way and they have choices to make. And the way in which that works is the narrative pauses and ceases and everything stops for a second. And then Zachary, before he makes a choice or a decision or responds, we decided that he would turn and look directly into the viewer. He would interpolate the lens and confront the viewer with his gaze whilst they made a decision.
I love those scenes. It feels like a weird art installation, you know, like a video art piece that would be called The Unbearable Lightness of Being 2012 video, and you have it in a gallery or something with just looking straight down the lens.
And this was a bizarre moment that happens various times throughout the film, whatever choices you make.
Also sometimes tinged with just an arcane strangeness or weirdness or humour or whatever, or just a sheer suffering, slapping myself as a fly lands.
And there's some very interesting nuances to each of them, and I really hope that people actually do debate their decision, whether with someone or in their head, and watch for a moment before just clicking one or the other.
They're very interesting to watch back. It's weirdly compelling to see yourself like that.
Him looking into the lens, you looking into his eyes, and you can sort of become hypnotised by him to a degree, which might even delay a decision or might even hopefully make you reconsider. You might automatically be going for one, and then you look at the guy and feel sorry for him or want him to suffer or whatever you may well feel, and may choose accordingly based not only on what's just happened or what you want to happen, but what's happening in that moment of stillness. The language was very different as well, and that required a lot of research and analysis of texts that were written around the time that we're set, and incorporating some of those words and some of that speech into our dialogue.
I think I kind of got off lightly in terms of my the language in my lines. I think Mephistopheles was probably the hardest thing I had to say, and as you can see, smashed that.
But it wasn't just the words, it was the way that the words are delivered. That was a big issue that we faced very early on. It's lucky that we did so much pre-production and script readings, because it came apparent in the script reading people were defaulting to Shakespeare in the Park, and people were going, doing this kind of very camp, theatrical, over-the-top, ye olde language. And it just didn't work.
Yeah, we were all putting on like, well, okay, maybe not everyone. I was definitely putting on the classic, you know, like Shakespearean wanky accent, and he was like, no, not having any of that.
The simple solution was to deliver it in a conventional way as you would, and allow the language, allow the words to make it old instead of the theatricality to make it old.
I went the total opposite way, so I just read the words that were on the page as naturally as I could, and tried not to think about too much about, you know, where they were from or, you know, what time period they're from. Just read the lines, get the emotion of the piece. That's the most important thing.
They changed the way I feel and act, and yeah, the language does the heavy lifting. Like, so as Marcus said, you don't need to be going thou shalt, you don't need to be overdoing it, because the grotesque grit of these strange words just simply does it well.
The costume was a real challenge, and we had some serious misfires with that. You know, purchased stuff online on the cheap, and the picture, it looked great, but then when you get it out the pack, it's not in any way what was represented in the image.
The weight of wearing all this clothing and a leather hat and hauling this heavy coffin around on the hottest day of the year, which it seemed to be for about 10 of the shoots, it really does make you able to channel some true suffering. And yeah, Often Mark's saying, do you need a break? Do we need to have a rest? Like, no, just do it again. Go, let's do it again.
So the costume really was a case of largely distressing things and making them look old and worn and used and tattered. And so there was a lot of taking out materials and stamping on them and muddying them up. There was a lot of ripping them and sewing them back together crudely, which is lucky because I can't sew. So the costumes are very ad hoc. We wanted them all to be individual and in some way reflect the character, so each one has something relevant and specific to that character in terms of it being ripped or torn or distressed or in pieces in a certain way. In terms of the props, the main props that we see throughout the film are of course the coffin and the cart. We looked into acquiring these in a range of different ways, and it became apparent that purchasing a coffin was not going to work, and therefore making one was more appropriate, and making one would be more in keeping with what would have happened in the reality of the world of the film. So the coffin, as you will see, is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. It's barely holding itself together, and that's because the average guy has made this out of what was available to him. It's not an M&S finest coffin. It's thrown together with scraps, maybe the marital bed possibly. So the cart was going to be a real challenge because it was going to do a lot of miles. It was going to see a lot of action over the course of the film. We found a really tough, robust one that could go over big flints and roots in the middle of the path and not involve having to wait for another wheel to be delivered and then spend a day trying to put it together. Way before any of us had heard of coronavirus or knew what it was, the plague and the sickness was a part of the script and the idea. It was going to be a subplot or a recurring theme throughout the narrative.
So the pandemic was an interesting time to shoot this, not only because it holds some relevance to the story, being set in plague times, but obviously it's hard to produce a movie at the best of times, but when it comes to during a pandemic where everyone's a little bit on edge, a little bit fearful, it made it, well, to me, it almost seemed impossible.
When lockdown first happened, the initial lockdown, we were in pre-production and still working on the script and the logistics, and that in itself afforded more time to prepare. But it also was an opportunity for location recce's, and I was often going out on individual walks on my own and having a moment. But I was also, that was a dual purpose thing. That was not just getting out in lockdown, that was also finding suitable spots for the various moments throughout the film.
Part of the ease of doing this project was the fact that it was all outdoors.
When the rules were lifted, when lockdown ended and we were allowed the rule of 6 and the eat out to help out and things started to somewhat get back to normal, as soon as that happened, that was our green light. That was for us, right, we're good to go. Okay, we can't have a big crew, but we're never going to have a big crew anyway, and most scenes are 2 people. In fact, most are 1 person.
So to do everything in those small little units, it probably made things a lot easier from that point of view. And we had this epically beautiful summer, so I'm sure that helped.
Making everyone feel a little safer, even when even if it was pissing down with rain, people still felt at least we're outdoors. We're not all like clumped together in a room where we can't maintain social distance and we can't whatever.
It worked. It didn't really infringe on us too badly. If anything, lots of people weren't working or were furloughed or whatever, so were more available.
Being out in the woods, to be honest, was lovely. During all the madness going on, the calmness and clarity I can get from just standing in the woods and just listening and looking at the light and stuff like that is quite lovely. So for me personally, as a breaker for all this other stuff that was going on, it was really nice.
We decided early on that we were going to go for music that was time appropriate.
He said, look, I'm doing this new thing, it's going to be set kind of in the 1600s, it's not going to be a case, he was very clear, it's not going to be Peaky Blinders where it's set in the 1920s, and actually you've got things like Nick Cave.
We were trying so hard to be authentic with so many aspects of the project and accurate and in keeping with the time in which it's set, to then whack some contemporary music on it sort of devalued it in my mind. So we really wanted to have an authentic soundtrack, largely using the instruments of the time.
And that obviously came with a bit of a challenge because, I certainly wasn't that familiar with, Baroque era kind of instruments.
And again, it sounds silly, but research was so important to look at different things that existed and what was used at the time was a necessary evil. And I was alarmed and shocked by how recent so many instruments are. Things that you think have been around forever actually have only been around a couple of 100 years.
It's kind of, okay, so how big is my palette? It's obviously, you can't have synthesizers, guitars, there's none of that kind of thing.
Bill's done some of his best work here, and he's experimented with instruments that he'd never even heard of before this project.
Now, as the project kind of went on, I got a bit of license with that, a little bit, so you might well have some kind of, ethereal kind of drones and what have you, maybe very, very slightly in the background, which clearly isn't, of the period.
The music is fantastic, and that brings up that brings a whole other dimension to it. Beautiful music.
That really flavoured the work as well, of course. There's almost constantly music or sound design throughout. So it really adds to the character and the tone of the piece.
There were themes for each of the different characters. I tried to keep it as subtle as possible, so it wasn't, too, like when you're watching a Western or something, the villain will come up and they'll have their own theme and it'll be really obvious. I didn't want it to be quite as in your face as that, maybe a little bit subtler.
It's like the music is its own character in the film. It perhaps illustrates all of the otherworldliness that Zachary doesn't quite believe in. It follows him around, and it's just essential to it.
And Bill's music is ideal for what we're trying to achieve. Moments of creepiness, moments of weirdness and strangeness and otherworldliness, and but juxtaposed with profound moments of beauty or pain or suffering or agony. So there's hours of the stuff for every conceivable moment, and a really brilliant, beautiful work in its own right.
I gave him a bell and said if he's got any projects coming up I'd like to be involved, and he told me about Twas the Devil, and I just thought it sounded perfect for something to be involved with, and he said that outlined what he needed: maps and a couple of props that would be like hand drawn, and so it was like a perfect project for me to get in on.
We knew we were going to need some illustrations and some artwork, and we knew that it had to be appropriate to the time period, but it needed to have some individual flair and be unique.
Yeah, so I started looking at loads of kind of 17th century woodcut designs of like the witch hunt era, but then also I started looking at old alchemical manuscripts from the 17th century and some medieval kind of different scriptures and things.
I wanted something original and bespoke and unique to the project that would be artwork in its own right as well, and Brad was definitively the man for that job.
And it was interesting because while I was doing that, like things would just like come to me. Like I'd go to Oxfam and there'd be a copy of like the Lindisfarne Gospels, and I was like, well, that's perfect. It's like all these kind of coincidences.
And Brad is a phenomenal illustrator. He produces tons of really unique, interesting, visually stunning artwork for different purposes and in different contexts.
But anything that kind of fitted into like the theme of like the devil, something that was a bit dark, that looked like from the old world and things like that. And so so I just kind of littered everything with just whatever took my fancy really. And it was like, it was basically my lockdown, just drawing weird maps and looking through weird books.
Everything that he does is so beautiful and so detailed and so intricate. And you know, the maps in particular, Zachary looks at the maps regularly, and we were going to always have close-ups of the real places that exist in East Anglia that he traverses through. So Brad was the ideal person to produce this stuff.
Yeah, they were kind of an amalgamation. I would take different bits from different things and just recombine them and put them down onto the maps and hide little bits and drop little kind of Easter eggs in and things like that.
The imagery that we had with those maps and all of that, it's just, yeah, all of that just brings it all up another level. It's some beautiful work.
Brad's artwork is fantastic and really is in keeping with the aesthetic and the tone and the strangeness of the project. He's done a brilliant job. One of the things that the film sets out to do is to be very much a portrait of now, even though it's set in the past and the language is archaic and the costume and the mise-en-scène is all very old. It's very much a portrait of now, and a lot of the contemporary issues and debates and controversies are tackled indirectly through our character of Zachary encountering the different people which represent different aspects of contemporary society that we have issue with.
That stoic character runs into lots of people who are almost a satire on today's concerns, where there is Nathan's character with his extreme left vision of everybody in the same clothing, or people blaming their misery on the climate changing, or having the jester who's censored by those in powerful and he's cancelled. So I run into sort of cancel culture and people addicted to smartphones, yet it's the printing press.
And I guess even you could possibly draw parallels between the devil, or the idea of the devil and what that represents, and all the kind of mass media stuff that's going on. You're not really sure what to believe, what the truth is.
That's from actual texts from the time, just talking about you will subscribe, and it's so parallels what is going on in our society with information technology and social media today, yet I believe a lot of that was contemporaneous to the printing press coming out. Again, people were afraid of that, as they are of technology today.
So I guess we're all kind of a bit like Zachary, trying to make our way across to one particular point perhaps, and being constantly bestrode from all angles with different views and different craziness, and just trying to navigate our way through it, I think. So yeah, there's definitely modern parallels you can draw between this story and what we're going through at the moment.
Or you have cut through things like other contemporary concerns like race. When I meet the Moore character, we can't understand each other, yet we connect more than most characters just on a common humanity. So perhaps it is just my character is blasting through all of these current concerns of our society, and just saying that there's something deeper that we need to concern ourselves with, doing the right thing, the old ideas, the morals.
It very much mirrors today, even though it's a very old, dirty mirror. During the course of the previous project, we'd managed to get a good team together, a core number of people that were very good at their role and very committed and understood the process. So going into this project, we were very lucky to have those people in place and those people established. When the project was in development and coming together, we knew immediately that Simon was ideal as the main character. In fact, the script was written with him in mind, so it was written for him, you could say. And we knew that this was a role that he would deliver on. It was very much in keeping with some of the previous projects and the previous characters that he's portrayed. A monomaniac, someone with a mission, someone that had to do something at all costs, regardless of the consequences to them. Fantastic performance as always. He really upped this performance and did his research and looked into the context and the language and what was going on at the time, and really channeled some proper guilt there. It's not just the performance that he does on the day. There's a lot of prep, there's a lot of reflection, there's a lot of discussion prior and during and after of the performance and of the character. And he really made Zachary come to life and made him convincing and done a fantastic job. Couldn't have asked for more.
Oh yes, fantastic, like the real cornerstone of the project.
Maureen, as the wife, Agnes, was an absolute trooper. She was a real soldier. She had to do very difficult, challenging things, although she's only in it very briefly for flashes of her in the past. What she had to do was quite intense.
The poor thing suffering, being thrown into a lake. You can see, again, real suffering. We only go for real suffering on this project.
Yeah, and she was there vomiting and just happily getting on with what was required.
And then a very beautiful presence on camera as well, just showed some really iconic, shimmering beauty in that.
Maureen is quite a striking person and very memorable, very unique, distinctive features, and that was important in Agnes, as well as the costume and the yoke and the buckets and the water.
And is also really good at supporting you when you're trying to act and forgetting my lines all the time, is able to send those over to me really well, you know, a real instinctive feel for what's needed behind the camera.
I'm one of the first choices that Zachary has to make, my character Mary. She is a leper.
We have worked with Rachel before. She played a key role in the previous project, and we were very keen to work with her again.
But yeah, I was a bit more involved on this one.
She was suitably creepy, but also nice at the same time, so a real sort of juxtaposition of two extremes there.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, again, in front and behind the camera.
I offered to do basically everyone's makeup, which on a horror production is no mean feat.
Doing fantastic work in all these grotesque visual, real effects in makeup and stuff like that.
Yeah, I used porridge oats actually for my leprous look, and I spent hours doing the colour, then remembered it was black and white.
It really brought up a level all of the design of a lot of the characters.
I had plenty of time on my hands to get in the way / help.
Scott is a phenomenal performer, had an absolute blast working with him on the last project and was really keen to work with him again.
Oh yes, a terrifying character, genius actor.
Scott is one of the nicest people I've ever met, and he's very serious, he's very prepared.
A very strange scene. I love that discussion I have with him, you know, where we talk about trying to act well. Why doesn't he try to act well? And I think that scene brings up an idea of evil, of just all of those wrong choices, and the idea of good or God, to remove an O from it, as being just simply choosing the next right things, known as process theology.
He looks great, he's got a phenomenal face, a really chiselled face, which we of course put loads of horrible stuff on to make it even weirder.
Scary looking guy, especially with Tommy's axe in hand, so a great guy.
He was a menacing character, he was a disturbing guy, and Maddox that he plays looked terrifying. He's one of the first people that Zachary encounters, so it was important that we didn't hold back on him, and he was an alarming monster of a man. Phil was absolutely brilliant at portraying Martin.
Yes, somebody who, a real actor who was going to come with his lines learned, so I knew I'd have to learn mine as well.
Phil is a great actor. He really delivers consistently moving performances, and he's very full of ideas and up for trying different things.
And I really liked working with him. I think we had a good connection. We're almost crying arm in arm in that scene, and I think we worked really well with him, and I really enjoyed that.
And again, his character goes two very different ways dependent on your choices, so he's essentially playing almost two different characters, but he did both incredibly well, two very different extremes. Absolute pleasure to work with Phil. With a film of this nature, we can get away with doing a lot of strange, weird stuff, which is always good. That's up our alley. And so along the road, he meets various people, many of whom are grotesque. But there are some characters that he encounters that are even more extreme. And we had a lot of fun designing these and casting these and, of course, performing these. And Zachary encounters some very strange people or monsters, as you might call them.
The hobby horse was a wonderful character, very threatening but also very bumbling. Like it was a very weird contrast.
Great fun filming that. Again, the hottest day of the year. Every day we film seemed to be the hottest day of the year.
Especially when he fell over.
And running around in that costume in the blazing, midday sun was one of the most energetic performances, shall we say.
Cut to.
Sound rolling.
Yep.
And giddy up. Callum is always great to work with, a really good performer, and really went for it with this role, really stepped up and gave Simon back as good as he got. Really nice sort of exchange between the two when it gets very heated.
The Miles is supposed to be effectively a mirror image of the lead character Zachary.
And we are brother to each other, and we make that connection for a while at least, until we find we're different and go on our ways.
Miles is on a very similar journey, carrying his wife from one location to another after also being falsely accused of witchcraft.
Callum's character is essentially the same as Zachary, but he's made a different choice.
The mirror kind of shatters when you realise that my ideology or my belief is completely different to Zachary's.
You get these kind of scenes often in films, and we've used them before in our work. So he sort of sees an alternative version of himself.
That again, a lot of these scenes actually have a sort of compassion to them, because my character often has this sort of subtle contempt, but their contempt gets deleted and turned into compassion when he meets characters like your one there.
We're seeing both of the choices here, both of the outcomes, and it's a film about choice. And so it's important that we see what happens if you go one way and the other way.
Miles believes the opposite, believes that, yeah, she's died and that's really sad, but it was God's plan. And Zachary doesn't like that.
And these guys have a full-on confrontation, and it's one of the rare times in the film where if you make a choice as a viewer, you're actually overridden by Zachary in a way. So even if you choose to be agreeable or be compliant and tell a white lie just to move on with your journey and not have a row, Zachary himself can't help himself, and he actually overrules the decision made by the viewer and speaks his mind regardless of them being the puppeteer.
Again, another person who we can rely upon. You can say, going to do a scene tonight, are you free? Yes, come straight along, do the job again, and you know what's required of, well, everything from the cameras and lights and sound to what an actor needs.
And he looked great as well. Obviously there's a bit of size difference between the two, so we compensated with a 2-foot top hat. Still wasn't big enough, but yeah, good fun. Keir is such a nice guy, so we really wanted him to play this particular character, the mourner, so that the audience would feel some sympathy. He's lost his son. A very heartfelt performance, but it very quickly goes from, oh, just want to give him a hug, to, oh my God, this guy is insane.
Brilliant. I do know my lines from the scene with Keir better than any other scene in the entire film, because we did it about 40 times. He had a very long speech which kept getting jumbled up, so we had to run through it again and again.
And poor Keir was screaming, "You are in hell," and all of these kind of things in the woods many times.
But he's delivered such a strange, macabre performance.
Keir was brilliant and looked the part as well.
Absolutely fantastic working with him.
I'd never actually met Caroline until the day that we shot, and she turned up in costume and makeup, and I met her for the first time in the pitch black woods at midnight. So that was unique, that was different, that was strange.
And that was a fantastic performance that she did, and I had to throw myself in with that, and in the dark, in the rain, and just sort of let myself be led by that.
She was very prepared, she was very organised. I'd in advance sent her some things to use as inspiration for her movement and her dance and her performance, and she nailed it, she smashed it. She was just a consummate professional.
I think that those were some of my favourite scenes, were those ones at night, again, where you're just in the pouring rain, or meeting this strange character and dancing and throwing the script out the window and doing a weird ritualistic dance in the night in a circle of candles, and getting a ton of footage that Mark somehow manages to edit into an incredibly beautiful, again very strange sort of art house scene.
You know, editing that sent me into delirium. I was all over the place.
I think what came out of it is a very beautiful scene there, but yeah, she's excellent at what she does there.
Very strange to meet someone for the first time with a torch on your head, not really sure. Somebody came along with her and it was kind of like we couldn't really see who they were, didn't really know who they were, and we've got this ring of fire and all hell's breaking loose, and it's possibly one of the strangest introductions I've ever had. Alex is a very ponderous, philosophical man generally, and the character really suited him. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the questions that the motionless man poses, or some of the thoughts that he has, are things that Alex would similarly have in real life.
And it's another time when I guess Zachary is able to expose his philosophy a little. He has made his choices. That it isn't what we fear is the results, but actually making the choice.
Now, Alex is a very pleasant character. The motionless man is one of the few people that Simon encounters that he doesn't have an outright confrontation with. There's a bit of humanity shared between the two.
Again, in a society where we scroll through Netflix for 45 minutes because there's 10,000 videos and we get paralysed by choice, Zachary is telling the motionless man there to simply just do anything. Whatever you do, do not stand still.
If anything, Zachary helps him out and he's grateful for his guidance. So yeah, Alex was fantastic as the motionless man.
And again, that's quite a nice motto to perhaps artists or creatives. Just go out and do something. It doesn't matter if it's bad, and failure is part of the process. Just go and do and do and do, and that's all we're here for.
Ben Drake, the most handsome peasant of the entire 17th century.
Oh, that was great. A beautiful song that he sings. That's another thing that I like in his project. The music that comes along.
Fantastic, as always delivers, a real professional performer. He knows all of his lines, he's very organised, he's very prepared, he's got questions and notes.
Yeah, he was talking about, again, blaming the devil for the desecration of his crops and things like that, and yeah, another time when we can get music into it.
Very quick, very efficient, very professional. Pleasure working with Ben again. Michael is a really dedicated, hard-working member of our team, and he was fantastic on the last project. He really made a difference on that one, and we were keen to have him involved in this one.
Yeah, the best guy to have around, again, for when you need all these prompts, when you need your lines, when you're, giving you ideas. Really great to have there.
He was primarily operating behind the scenes, but Michael is also an actor and a performer, and he's in various plays and productions as well. So it seemed like a great opportunity to get him in front of the camera in a significant role.
So dedicated. Again, it's this project, like Zachary's journey, it's all about work. And he turned up all the time, always to be relied upon, and did what needed to be done.
Again, there's these real extreme emotions. He has to almost play different characters in the same scene, and dependent on the choices that the viewer makes, depends on which version of the character you get, and the different versions are incredibly emotionally different and thematically different. And Michael has this very strange technique of doing something and then not being happy with it, and in the middle of it just immediately resetting and going again, which was quite unique. I've never really seen someone do that before. So he'd be halfway through a line and then suddenly go back to the beginning and start again without any kind of cut or reset or feedback. So a very energetic, hyper performance from Michael there, and suitably insane. So Bill, first and foremost, was the composer and produced the soundtrack, and one of the ideas was to have a musician along the road that Zachary would see.
So less confident and happy in front of a camera, to be absolutely honest with you. But Mark said, look, it'd be nice if you did a bit of a cameo, and there's a scene where there is the musician up a tree.
Bill was obviously first choice, the only choice to do that, and play a couple of different songs.
I had a really bad back at the time, and so I climbed up this half-fallen tree and was sitting really uncomfortably for what felt like ages.
So dependent on the choice you just make depends on the song that you get and the mood of the song and the lyrics of the song.
Yeah, there was actually 2 pairs of mating shield bugs on my leg, and it was at that point where it doesn't look like you're very high up, but it felt like I was quite high up. And I thought, I can't really wriggle about too much, so it was kind of a case of get on with it, you know, make it quick, guys. Yeah.
His music is absolutely beautiful. Just as I go under that tree there and him playing that, I was able to really feel the sadness of those tunes and miserably walk by or be uplifted by that music in the other song, and it sent me on my path, on my journey.
All credit to Bill for that. He was a real trooper and had to do it multiple times, and yeah, performed better than he usually does at his gigs.
But yeah, he's a real cornerstone of that project. It's yeah, essential, that music. It's a very musical piece.
By the time I climbed back down, my left leg had gone completely dead, like, you know, the kind of pins and needles that, I don't know, just came straight from hell.
Chris has consistently delivered fantastic performances, and this was no exception. So his character is one of the few characters that we see more than once, and he's one of the few characters that have power or coin or resources that most of our other characters don't have. So it's a slightly different performance. He's not as outwardly deranged as the others.
Oh, good old Chris. Yeah, again, I just remember the heat of that day, but Chris absolutely blasts out his I love his acting style there. He was quite a adversary in this case, and yeah, no, he did an excellent job.
I love working with Chris. He's so keen and so enthusiastic and so up for anything. You know, you do feel bad when he's lying on the floor, covered in blood and whatever for God knows how long. But yeah, Chris is great fun to work with. Good old Akai is always a brilliant performer.
Ah yes, another regular on the projects really, isn't it? And another good day out.
It's a strange little scene that they share, and it's difficult for him to communicate anything because obviously the audience don't understand that language and there are subtitles there. But although it's a brief moment where they just encounter each other, there's a real warmth in their brief moment together. And I think they see a little something of each other in one another, that it's kind of like a mirror of sorts. Even though they're completely other and different on the outside at least, essentially they're very much the same, or at least similar underneath.
Yeah, again, it's these people who are able to have a good connection with. It's that process of acting where you're not thinking, what am I saying? But what is he saying, and listening to him purely and reacting to it. And I think that's what we got going in that scene there. Again, nice working with somebody who's got that process.
Akai's a great actor, a wonderful performer, and he was able to get that warmth and that tenderness, if you will, with a little look and a little glance and a little gesture. Yeah, so a very brief and subtle performance, but a very profound one, I think. On the previous project, it's no secret that Chris struggled with remembering his lines.
Poor old Chris had a couple of lines to do on the last project that got a little mangled up.
And so on this one, he wanted to know his lines, and he learnt those lines. He took them on holiday with them. He made little notes and cue cards, and he rehearsed it and rehearsed it and rehearsed it. And instead of cup of tea, he had pages and pages of complex, lengthy, convoluted language.
But he came along and showed everyone how it was done and knew them beautifully.
Upon action, he did his first huge epic line, and he didn't stop. He did the whole fucking scene, you know, unexpectedly, and he did it word for word, without hesitation, with all these cool little nuances and details that he'd planned and he'd rehearsed in the mirror, and he was going to have, you know, accents here and dips here and pauses there.
Smashed it out and raised it above and beyond, and you know, even catching the ball in the cup was done perfectly. So yeah, he was a genius.
Wow, yeah, we were all completely gobsmacked at how well he did on the first take. It was brilliant, real professional. It's always a delight to work with Nathan. He's a great performer. He's done some fantastic work for us in the past.
Fantastic working with Nathan, as it always is.
The character that he plays, the merchant, is quite a complex character. Although we only see him briefly, he's got a lot going on, and he's got a backstory that we delve into briefly.
Him lying in the dirt drunk. He's one of the characters who Zachary seems to get along with pretty well, and until he finds out his stark vision of the future and storms off. But it's always nice working with Nathan.
Initially, Zachary and the merchant seem to connect, and they have some things in common, and it's one of the rare times that we see Zachary smile, but very quickly that comes undone, and as soon as they begin to become friendly or brotherly, almost instantly there's a revelation, and immediately there's a confrontation. So Nathan played that character incredibly well. Maureen's so much fun.
She had a lot of trouble with saying Thaxted.
Thaxted.
Poor Maureen could not say Thaxted.
Thaxted.
No matter what we did, no matter how many times we did it,
To Thatched.
she would say Thaxted, Fuxted, Fuxted. She just could not say Thaxted.
Thatched.
She couldn't say Thaxted.
Thatched.
It went on and on. I can't even begin to imagine how many takes we've got.
Thatched.
It went on for quite some time.
Thatched.
Had it been just about any other word, we could have changed it, we could have altered it, but because of course his eventual end is Thaxted, and we'd already established that and filmed loads of scenes that make that very clear, we couldn't then just say Colchester or whatever.
Thatched.
Always fun working with Maureen. She's such a great performer. Ian really fucking went for the jester. Mind-blowing performance, really, really good, profound, difficult and challenging dialogue, lots of it, an extreme performance, and Ian really delivered that. He looked great, he was well up for it, he was really enthusiastic.
Really having such presence on screen, absolutely great, you know.
When we completed that scene and he was done, you know, he wanted to hang around, and we were doing a night scene when, of course, that phenomenal storm came and washed everything away, and he was just up for it. He hung around and got involved in that and helped out with that as well. So always great working with Ian, and he really went above and beyond on this one. The jester, for me, is quite an important character, even though, you know, he's another fun, mad person along the journey. But, you know, Ian exceeded expectations on that one. Stuart is a natural performer.
Oh yes, genius. I mean, it's hard not to laugh at that ebullient performance when I hear his off-camera greetings and things.
You know, he can't make toast without getting an applause for doing something theatrical. He's so over the top, and I love working with Stuart. He's always takes it up to 11.
A very strange scene, having this whole gang of people just silent in the forest, mesmerised, and the flamboyant leader declaring all of these things.
Great fun, you know, and the character was so suited to his strengths of theatricality, and yeah, he really went crazy with this one, over the top. He was really prepared and really learnt every one of his lines, and he had some big, long, complex, horrible, challenging lines, but he surpassed expectations and brought a real flair and flamboyance to that character that was required. Rosie was an absolute delight. She was such a fun character to work with.
Yeah, so Rosie's 9, and she's very much into show business, and so she goes to a dance and a musical theatre and stuff like that. But when Mark said, look, I need someone that's kind of that age, would Rosie be interested? I kind of put it to her, and I knew exactly what she'd say, and she was, well up for it.
Oh yeah, it's very nice working with her. She's starting out in her acting career there.
And she was not just involved on the day when she filmed her scenes, but she was involved prior and came and looked at the location and looked at the costume, and so we did a bit of prep. Obviously working with children is always challenging and difficult, and particularly as her scene was quite dark and had some very adult themes in it. But she took it in a stride.
Yeah, it's great to see that, and she was very prepared to go again and again and again until it was done perfectly. So that was really nice to see. Had the great spirit.
The really interesting thing about Rosie is just how intelligent and sophisticated and adult she was, and her mind is just set to problem solve. So I remember a particular moment where Cleary had to take the coins out of his bag, and we did a couple of takes where he was fumbling around, he couldn't get them, he's got these huge massive gloves on, and he was like, right, go again, and we did it for a couple of takes, and then Rosie said, why don't you just have them in your hand? I was like, fucking hell. How embarrassing that this child was just pointing out the obvious, and no one, myself included on set, had thought. It's brilliant. So yeah, she's absolutely super smart and very perceptive.
She was great. She kind of just took to it, and the more violent the better. I think the fact that she had to stab someone in the back, I mean, she's been doing that to me for 9 years.
Brad is a very distinctive looking character. He's got a really interesting look and physique and voice, and the minister needed to be somebody that could boom it out and be quite intimidating, and Brad was just the ideal.
Well, I think he kind of appealed to my ego a little bit. He kind of said that if there's anyone I know that could be like a religious cult leader, it'd be you. And I was like, oh, thanks, man.
Great fun, multiple takes, the poor guy. But yeah, brilliant. He was fantastic. It was the first time that he performed on screen, and it's always nice to have a newbie. And he was very quick to just get into the rhythm of things, and cast whatever dignity he has to the side and go for it.
Oh yeah, that was, I think, one of the first ones we did, and him blasting out his speeches on quite a busy hillside where there's lots of families. That was a fantastic start to it all.
Yeah, I think there was a few instances where pronouncing the words, there was a specific word that I can't remember what it was, but I kept getting it wrong.
I like the word idolaters or idolaters. It's that. That's great. I think it's idolaters, isn't it, or is it idolaters? I forget. Let's get it both ways, and they have it done a few different ways in each speech.
Idolaters, idolaters. See, I still don't know which one of those is right.
I'm asking, which way did I do it? I don't know. Let's go again. So that's another speech I know well from doing it a few times.
Well, I liked it. I mean, I came away with like a really sore voice that I hadn't experienced in since I was a kid or something.
Yeah, brilliant performance, and great fun to work with Brad. Tom Gilson is the best, not only in terms of his performing ability, but in terms of his contribution to the wider project. Tom is a very gifted actor. I worry that we've typecast him as this very aggressive, psychotic villain.
Seems to be that I get portrayed as a bold, psychotic, angry man.
But he does it so well, which is so at odds with his everyday existence as this fluffy teddy bear, this darling sweetheart hot water bottle that you just want to embrace.
Yet again, Tom Gilson is kind of a scene stealer.
Tom's character, the Major, is obviously, if this was a computer game, he would be a boss, I guess. So he's a more dominant character and a returning character as well.
So yeah, he's got a boundary, a crossing along the path that Zachary needs to take in order to bury Agnes. And he's very particular about this path and who can cross it and who can't.
Tom Gilson, the Major, my nemesis on that. Perhaps if we're looking at contemporary society he's this sort of authoritarian figure who makes the rules and we abide in them unthinkingly.
Absolutely brilliant performance, as you'd expect, and you know, we're out in the middle of God knows where at midnight in a phenomenal storm, soaked to the skin, drenched, freezing cold, lightning going off just over there.
Absolutely hammering down with rain, thunder and lightning, mud everywhere. Just, yeah, it really set up the scene perfectly and definitely helped me to put a bit more oomph into the performance, I think, so that was good.
He doesn't moan, he doesn't grumble, he just gets on with it. He enjoys it, he loves it, you know, and that's what you need, that kind of really positive attitude, that up for it, whatever it takes, regardless.